Hello again, students. Welcome back to the VLP Network. As always, it's Instructor Holland here, coming to you in the new year. I hope everyone's holidays and New Year celebrations were safe, and I hope everyone had a good time and everyone is starting their New Year's resolutions off strong. Before we get into any content whatsoever today, I just want to take a very brief moment to thank all of my subscribers. We finally reached 100 subscribers, which is a very big accomplishment, at least for me. I'm very, very happy that I have at least over 100 students that are learning something from my videos, and I hope that you guys are at the very least taking something important and taking something useful away from what I'm trying to teach here. Having been an instructor for over 10 years, it is always an accomplishing feeling, and it's always a wonderful feeling whenever a student tells you that what you taught them helped them in some way. This has happened a few times now since I've started my channel, and I just want to say I'm very happy that what I'm doing is helping you guys, as that was the ultimate goal of this channel from the start, was to try and educate people who might not know a whole lot about self-defense and protection and just being a prepared human in general. So once again, guys, I appreciate it. That's awesome. Last little housekeeping bit before we get into today's content. I just want to say I apologize to you guys for not uploading sooner or having a relatively inconsistent uploading schedule. I'm very, very busy with the start of the new year. As I mentioned in my previous video, I started an EMT course on the 3rd of January. Here is my massive book from the Idaho Medical Academy, and I'm learning a lot of things. It's really awesome. I did this because going into law enforcement, I want to be a better prepared law enforcement officer, and it's always a good thing to know more stuff about, complex medical issues, so that way if you're ever in a situation where you need to help somebody or help yourself, you have the knowledge and the skills to do so. It's a very intensive course. A lot of the studying is being done at home by me online, with some labs and some other practical application portions being done in person during the week. And so I have a weird schedule, and it's very difficult for me sometimes to even make videos, but I will do my absolute best, I promise, to get you guys more content. Some of the future content might even be in regards to some medical stuff, so that way everyone can have a little bit of a better understanding of what to do medically if a situation occurs to you. Okay, so let's move on to today's class. So today's class was kind of inspired by the very last case study I did. The case study you guys remember was on Dennis Rader, or the BTK killer. In that video, when I was breaking down some of the lessons that we could have learned from BTK, specifically the Otero family murders, I mentioned a point that had to do with compliance, and when compliance is both necessary and when compliance at certain points, if you take compliance too far, compliance can actually be very deadly for you. I had some students contact me about it, and they wanted me to kind of expand on that, and I figured it'd be a good video, a short one, just to kind of elaborate on what I was talking about, so that way you guys can have a better understanding in general about when compliance is a necessary thing and when compliance can be a very detrimental thing. So that is what today's video will be focused on, because it is actually a big thing in self-defense and self-protection, when to comply with a hostile individual and when to fight back. So with that being said, students, if there's nothing else for me, I have nothing else for you. Let's have a seat and let class begin. So students, before we start to delve deep into whether compliance is a good idea or not during specific situations, it's very important to break down why human beings, for the most part, are compliant in general life anyway. Now, it's worth noting that when I was an executive protection instructor down at Pacific West Academy in California for EP agent students, this is something that we tended to hit on a lot. As a matter of fact, I was an assistant instructor and an instructor for 3 separate psychological courses, Behavior 1, 2, and 3. Behavior 1 specifically dealt with human aggression and why human beings become aggressive. Behavior 2 focused on body language and what you can figure out about an individual based upon their body language, what their actions are going to be, or what their mindset is. And Behavior 3, for lack of a better term, was behavioral manipulation. How can we convince people or influence people to do what we want them to do? Because that's very important when we're trying to either de-escalate a situation or trying to ensure that our client is safe. It's also a very important skill to have in the security and executive protection community in general, because there's a lot of things that you have to accomplish in a very short period of time, and in order to accomplish them, you need help from people, and these people sometimes are not willing to help you unless you influence them to help you. So I taught all 3 of those courses along with some other instructors, so I have a relative understanding of human psychology and why human beings are going to be compliant. Now, this is not going to be a psychology-focused class. I'm simply going to hit on the very, very brief things that you need to understand about why human beings are compliant, so that way you can figure out why you are compliant most of the time. So really, when looking at why human beings do what they do in general, why we do some of the actions that we partake in, why we behave the way that we behave, one of the best gauges is a thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Essentially speaking, without getting too far into it, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you ever look at it, it kind of looks like a food pyramid. It is the measurement of what human beings need from the most basic level all the way to, I would guess you would say, an advanced quote level, psychologically speaking. So at the very beginning, we go from physical stuff that human beings need in order to survive. And then as we build up, we have these basic needs. We start to delve into psychological and emotional reasons why human beings need specific things to be either emotionally healthy or just to survive in general. The hierarchy of needs is a very good way of gauging what a human being needs so that way we can figure out why they're behaving the way that they're behaving. Now, when you look at the hierarchy, one of the common themes that is perpetually repeated over and over again in one way, shape, or form is a human being's emotional level and emotional need to be accepted or to just be around other human beings. Humans are social creatures. We have a deep desire to be accepted. We have a deep desire to be recognized by other human beings. And so if we stray from that, a lot of the time we end up being considered a pariah or an outcast because we don't follow along with what would be considered normal in society. This need and desire to fit in and be accepted by other people is so powerful, in fact, that individuals who are in a group will oftentimes follow the same exact behavior of a group, even though it might be considered extreme. Such extreme behavior that as an individual, they wouldn't do it by themselves, but because they're in a group, they have no problem doing it. You all have probably heard about the term mob mentality. That's where this comes from. This forms the core concept of why human beings tend to be so compliant whenever other human beings demand things from them. At our very, very, very core of our existence, we have no desire to make this person not happy with us. We don't want them to not accept us. We don't want them to go and spread rumors about us. Hey, Holland's an asshole because he didn't do this thing for me that one time. Because if we end up not being accepted by society, it really, really hurts us on the deep emotional level. Even people who say, oh man, I don't care what anyone thinks, that very well might be true for the most part, but even at our core, even those types of people who are introverts and such, they still, at a basic level, want to be accepted and liked by other humans. So when someone comes up to us and tells us to comply with this or to do this, we tend to just do it because we don't want that person to be unhappy and therefore not like us. This is why when asked, hey, why did you do this? People tend to use the excuse of, oh, well, I felt so pressured. One of the other primary reasons is because we're afraid of retaliation. So if I don't do this for this specific person, I would really rather not have something bad happen, or I would not like to start or instigate a situation, and so I will do it in order to maintain the peace, because there is a survival mechanism inside of us that knows that if a confrontation occurs, our survival mechanism says something bad could happen to us, and so we don't want that to happen. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that compliance is a bad thing. Compliance is actually very, very important for daily life and to maintain a structured society, and that's what we'll get into now. If we're going to live in a structured and relatively peaceful first world society, then people need to be compliant. And that's one of the reasons why compliance, for the most part, is a necessary thing. After all, if you just had every single person always go, screw the rules, I'm never gonna listen to the establishment, man.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
Then it would be complete and total anarchy, and people would be able to just go around and fulfill even their deepest, darkest desires, which is not something that we want in a society where people are trying to live relatively peacefully. Now, that's in general for a large body society like a country or a community, but if we're speaking on an individual level, when does compliance become something that we probably shouldn't do? The way this is usually formed in a self-defense or self-protection situation by a lot of instructors is somebody comes up with some sort of false multiplier like a gun or a knife and demands something from you. And you'll often hear them say, okay, well, comply with them because it's not worth your life. For the most part, they are relatively true, for the most part, but there are caveats to this rule. Whenever gauging whether or not compliance is something that we're going to need to do in a situation or not, we need to do what's called a threat assessment. If you ever served in the military or in law enforcement, then you know what I'm talking about. Essentially, what a good threat assessment is taking the facts of a specific situation, weighing them in your head, and then making a decision based on what's called the totality of circumstances. This is one of the most effective ways of really making any decision whatsoever, but especially in a situation where your life is on the line. In most situations, compliance is going to be a necessity, because if you tend to resist, then you end up putting yourself off in a worse position than you started off in. So let's do a really quick example right now. You are walking to your car with a shopping carriage full of groceries, and somebody comes up to you, takes out a knife, and demands your cash in your wallet. If you stop and you really analyze the situation for just a brief moment, you'll understand that the chances of survivability if you comply are far increased than if you resist in that moment. And again, that's looking at the totality of circumstances. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean this. The aggressor has made a very specific demand. He wants the cash in your wallet. He hasn't mentioned anything else, and he hasn't said he wants you to do anything else. You can also ascertain that if he actually wanted to do something bad to you, as in he wanted to come up and hurt you or kill you in some way, he wouldn't have come up asking for your money. He would have just come up and started attacking you. Based on the totality of circumstances of what we can infer from this individual, we can probably deduce that if we give him the money, we're going to get out just fine. But what are the pros and cons of resisting in that moment? Well, could you fight him off? You certainly could, but the guy has a force multiplier, which is a deadly tool that could be used to cause significantly more damage to you than you can inflict upon that person with just your empty hands. If you attack him, remember, you have to understand that perpetrators are people too, and they have a fight or flight mechanism just the same as you do. If this guy decides to fight back and protect his life against you, who's now attacking him, then he's going to have a distinctive advantage, and it's probably not going to end well for you. So again, based on the totality of circumstances for both compliance and resistance, we can infer that compliance at that point in time is our best option for survivability. And this tends to go with pretty much everything in life. If you take a look at any situation that you find yourself in, compliance is usually the best thing for you. Even in everyday life, like I said. So you come home, your girlfriend asks you to do the dishes, and you decide to go do them. What are the benefits to doing the dishes and complying with her? Well, the dishes are done so that way you have a clean sink, your girlfriend is happy so that way you don't got to listen to her get angry at you, and in general, you've accomplished something throughout the day. If you resist, however, your girlfriend's not going to be happy, the dishes in the sink are disgusting, and you kind of are just a lazy piece of crap. So for the most part, compliance is something that's required in everyday life in order for a society to be successful and peaceful. However, compliance can very, very quickly be the thing that ends up killing you or getting you into a way worse situation, and that's what the focus of the Dennis Rader BTK case was, and that's what we're going to get into next. If you guys saw my last video, my Dennis Rader video, and you analyzed the Otero family murders along with me, you know that the Otero family pretty much did whatever Dennis Rader asked of them. He came into the house with a firearm under the impression that he was a runaway escaped convict, and that if they had just complied and gave him what he wanted, which was jewelry and valuables, he said that he was a robber, then he was going to leave their house peacefully and try and escape. Obviously that didn't end up happening, because eventually what he did was he ordered them upstairs, and then after that he ordered them to lay face down on the ground with their hands behind their back so he could bind them one by one. They again complied with this, and so eventually that led them to be put into a worse situation than what they were originally in. And this is a primary example of when compliance can work completely against you and put you in a far deadlier position than you were originally. Ultimately, again, we have to do a threat analysis of the situation. Is the situation gradually deteriorating to where we're going to be in a way worse situation if we continue to allow this guy to exert control over us? Again, let's make another example. So let's use the example that we just used in the last part of this video. Again, coming out of the grocery store with a shopping cart, a guy comes up to you with a knife or some sort of instrument, and he demands your wallet from you and all the cash in your wallet. It's a good idea to comply, right? So you do that. You give him the cash, but then he looks at you and he doesn't go away. He then turns to you and says, okay, I want you to start walking. All right, so now the situation has developed and changed. We have to do a new threat analysis now, because the threat analysis that we previously did at the beginning of the scenario only attributed for the things that he asked for in the current situation that we understand. But now this is a whole new factor. He now wants you to start walking. Where does he want you to go? Where are you walking to? What is he going to do when you get to the place that he wants you to go to? He's not going to tell you these things, and so all of these unknowns are potential dangers. He could very well lead you to a vehicle. He could very well lead you into an area that is less populated, where less attention is drawn to him, so he can do whatever he wants to you. And so now the survivability of the situation has deteriorated because of this guy's desires and this guy's demands. But let's just say you did what the Otero family did, which was comply. You say, okay man, whatever, please don't hurt me, and you start walking. You walk for a little while and then he eventually tells you, hey, you see that black car that's parked right there? Go over to that car. Okay, now we have an even worse situation. You know there's a vehicle and you know he's probably going to want you to go into that vehicle. But again, you comply, and so you walk over to the vehicle and then he says, stop, don't look at me, put your hands behind your back and don't move. If you move, I'm going to stab the shit out of you. You then hear him starting to take out some duct tape. He's ripping the duct tape out, and so you can infer that he's going to bind your hands behind your back. Okay, hold on, whoa, the situation has taken even worse of a turn now. Stop and think for a second, again, using threat analysis, what could be the potential possibilities of what's going to happen to you and what has gradually occurred because of your compliance. This guy is going to put you in a vehicle. It's his vehicle, and so your maneuverability is decreased because you're not going to be able to escape. He's going to drive you somewhere, a place that you don't know where, and the possibility of him bringing you to a place where there's even more people, his allies or something, is increased as well. So now you're also outnumbered. Not only that, but he wants to bind your hands behind your back, which limits your ability, again, to be mobile and to fight back. Can you see how as the situation just increases, you are constantly having the cards stacked against your survival? And that's because you complied the entire time. You allowed him to exert control over you. As a matter of fact, something that you may not know that you have inexplicably done is give this guy the confidence that you are not going to do anything to him. He's probably thinking in his head, oh, this is so great because this guy, this person that I'm taking advantage right now, this person is a sheep, this person is a soft target who is doing whatever the hell I demand them to do. He's pretty much confident that he can do whatever he wants with you and you're not going to give him any trouble. This is the kind of victim that every predator hopes that they have, the one who is subservient and the one who is a soft target. Predators, psychopaths, and other people who wish to do harm on other human beings always look for soft targets. And that's because they know that if they end up going and attacking a hard target, someone's going to fight back against them and therefore either make it difficult, if not impossible, to accomplish what their primary mission is. This is unfortunately why you see places like schools and shopping malls and movie theaters being shot up by these psychopaths, because they know the possibility of them encountering someone who's going to be able to perform the same exact lethal force that they are putting on other people is diminished. This is why you never see hard targets getting attacked like a police station. I mean, when's the last time you heard of like a Terminator situation happening where a guy walks into a police station, guns a-blazing? I don't think I've ever heard of a police station getting legitimately attacked by an armed individual, and that's because they know that they're going to get smoked the moment they walk into that police station. So let's go over the situation as a whole and what we are being led into now that we've complied. The perpetrator has managed to rob us of our belongings. He has managed to move us to a vehicle, put us in the vehicle so that way we're being taken to an unknown area and bound our hands behind our back so that way we are immobile and can't fight back as effectively. All of these things have escalated from the previous situation, which was this guy just wants our money. And the reason all of these things have accrued that way is because we let them happen. And this is the primary lesson of this class today, and the primary lesson that I was trying to get across in the Dennis Rader case study. You do not want to comply all the time. At some point, you have to draw a proverbial line in the sand and say, okay, I will comply until this point, but at this point, you and me are fighting. Because regardless of whether or not I die or get injured in the fight, I would have had that happen anyway to me because of the situation I complied with and I put myself in. Oh, Holland, are you victim blaming? Are you saying that the victim is the person that should be held responsible because they had this horrible thing happen to them? No, of course not. I'm obviously not saying that. But what I am saying is that you are responsible for your own security and you are responsible for your protection. And this is one of those things that you need to understand. Complying too much can eventually lead you into a worse off situation, and you need to know when to stand up and be that individual who's going to be aggressive and fight back. After all, history is rife with individuals and groups of people and civilizations that complied for only a certain amount of time and then eventually had really bad things happen to them to the point where they said, you know what, enough is enough, and they rebelled, they fought back, or anything of that nature. It has to happen down to an individual level at the same time. And that is ultimately what I'm trying to portray in the lesson of this class. Compliance can absolutely be detrimental in certain situations as long as we have done the proper threat analysis to determine when compliance is both necessary and when compliance is going to put us in a bad situation. So students, in closing, before we head out of here for the day, there's one last thing I want to harp on. And that's this idea that's been bothering me, and it's been bothering a lot of the guys that I associate with, a lot of the law enforcement community, military, some of my veteran buddies, as well as the security friends that I made while I was working in security, as well as teaching executive protection, my fellow instructors and stuff like that. And it's this idea that humans, not just men, even though it's kind of specifically geared towards men nowadays, this idea that people do not need to be capable of great violence because that is a bad thing. That's a negative thing. We have to be peaceful. We have to be peaceful. We have to have peace and love, and that any sort of violence is going to be negatively viewed. I'm telling you right now, that is an absolutely ridiculous thought process, and that's because there is a distinctive difference between being peaceful and being harmless. How can I attest to this? Well, let me tell you, having been an MMA fighter for a little while now and having competed for multiple gyms all across the country, and not only in MMA, but also in jiu-jitsu, in judo, and submission grappling, I can wholeheartedly attest to you that some of the most supportive, some of the kindest, some of the best people that I've ever met who would give you the shirt off their back are also capable of extremely technical, savage violence. In the gym, these guys on my team who I've competed with, who I've trained with, super nice, super supportive, some of my best friends who I've made great memories with. But then when I see them get out on the mat, or I see them get out in the cage, or God forbid we ever got into a situation on the street, the things they were capable of doing to another human being were ugh. But that's the thing, they were never like that all the time. They were only like that when they absolutely needed to be, when it was crunch time and they had to either defeat their opponent or protect themselves. And that's because they had extreme self-discipline and they were able to differentiate when violence was necessary and when to just be a normal, nice person. I don't understand why having a great capability of violence is viewed as this Neanderthalic type of mentality that only barbarians have nowadays. It's almost as if people want you nowadays to be that person that goes to Starbucks, drinks their soy latte in their wool jumper, and sit there with their legs crossed with extremely low power body language, because if you don't do that, then you're just this caveman who constantly approaches every single situation like it is a nail that needs to be hit with a frickin' sledgehammer in order to accomplish anything in life. That's certainly not the case. If you are a person who is subservient, if you are a person who is not dominant, if you are a person who is not capable of great violence, that doesn't mean you're peaceful. That means that you are harmless. And there is a very, very big difference between the two. And that's one of the things I mean when I mean being compliant can be deadly. In a way, I guess you could say that being peaceful people, they're only capable of being peaceful because they are capable of great violence. And I feel like that generally ties into compliance and why people are so compliant, because people feel nowadays for some reason that in order to be peaceful, you have to be subservient, you have to be harmless, and that is simply not the case. Make sure you train, make sure you make yourself better, turn yourself into a person that, if need be, can be very deadly and very lethal, but outside of those situations, be a nice person. So students, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you again for the 100 plus subscribers. I'm deeply humbled. I appreciate it. I hope you are all learning something from these videos. I will continue to post my regularly scheduled content as long as this whole thing does not take up too much of my time. But I'm happy to see you guys in the new year, share knowledge with you, and also have proper dialogues in the comments section. So if there's nothing else for me, I have nothing else for you. Hope you all have a good January. Class is dismissed.